Hello there.
Hello, mate.
Welcome to another episode
of Finding Aiden.
Today, we're going to talk about why you don't want to poison yourself by following cookie-cutter solutions and how I did just that to my beloved. Oh!
Yeah, tried to kill me.
Didn't try.
Well, you were in the process. You're right.
I tried to heal you.
You're right.
And I ended up hurting you.
Yeah, but you were killing me.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. It's a quite interesting and roundabout story that's got a lot of lessons and gems along the way, and that we recently went through when we got knocked down with the Rona. Not so much fun in the moment because we were quite sick, about 10 days or so. I got it first, and then I passed it on to you. Mm-hmm. And so I was getting sick, and you were able to cook soup and take care of me a little bit.
Yeah, it was great.
Then the roles reversed.
Yeah.
And I got to cook soup for you, and then you got really sick of my soup.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Started threatening me, you're going to break my feet if I make more soup.
Talk about negative conditioning. So it wasn't just like I didn't want your soup. It was like every time I smelled it. Well, and, truth be told, you make delicious soup, but it was the same soup every day.
I loved it.
It was really good until I started associating being nauseous with the smell of the soup.
Yep.
Anyway, that's the first little lesson.
That was the first casualty.
Mm-hmm. Change up the food with the sick people. Change it up.
Especially as the sense of smell and taste is returning.
Yes.
Get fresh things that aren't associated with vomiting and headaches and fevers and all the other kind of nasty stuff that can be going on. Mm-hmm. But so to bring us back, this was mid-November. I caught the thing, and then you caught the thing, and we were down and out for a little while there, and we learned a lot through this experience, and we're going to run through some of that with you right here, right now, and hopefully by sharing our story can prevent you from having to repeat something similar, from having to go down and essentially disregard your body's wisdom, and in the process of doing so, cause damage, right? This is something that is happening literally every day, all the time, in the way that we've been taught to think about health, and the way that practitioners are taught to think about health, and to, you have such and such symptoms, let me give you such and such treatment.
Because it makes sense, because that's what the studies say, that's what the companies are telling us it's good for.
Yeah, and so at least when you're doing this in a natural approach, there's usually very little chance of negative side effects. The most common thing is that it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
However, there are times, because these natural substances, herbs and supplements, are really effective, they can also have a pretty detrimental effect if used incorrectly or under the wrong circumstances, which is one of the things that we discovered. Indeed.
And if I had a time machine, I would go back to when I first felt this slightest tickle in my throat, and on recommendation of your brother, actually, he brought this to our minds, I would nebulize hydrogen peroxide and probably prevent the whole ordeal. But this was not meant to happen this time. We were definitely destined for sickness. And either way, that stuff, when I started working it into our protocol about halfway through being sick, it really helped me to turn the corner. So that's just the thing to mark down in your holistic medicine cabinet. If you don't have a nebulizer or atomizer, as you may see it called, good thing to have.
And if you don't have one, something that I learned many years ago, or it was actually confirmed for me. It's something that I used to do unconsciously and then was confirmed for me by a scientist I was doing a little bit of work with back in the day. And that is that at the moment you feel that tickle like you were talking about, if you can simply swallow that tickle down your throat into your stomach, and the best way to do that is with something hot. So you know how they always recommend drink hot tea with lemon, things like that. That's why I think it's probably based on that idea. Because if we can get that tickle, which is essentially the virus or whatever it is that is starting to fester and grow and develop in the throat area, that's where it generally starts. If you can get it into the stomach acid will actually kill it. And so you don't actually develop a cold. And I've done this for, I did this for like 20 years. I just never got sick. But I was doing that as a religious practice. And then this gentleman kind of confirmed, oh yeah, that's exactly how it works. So if you don't have a nebulizer, drink a lot of tea, but a lot of hot liquid, the hot to melt it down into the belly, and just a lot of swallowing. And 2 little tricks.
Yeah, and so like most times, at least for in our time together, we've only been sick one other time, really. But, we had the things. We have the oregano oils. We have the elderberry syrup. We have the, what else were we doing? Thieves oil, the hot tea, the lemon tea, the raw honey, all the things. Right?
Cold busting tonic, that nice hot one, and the ginger.
Yeah, all the things that are known to support the process of recovery. But it was a stubborn cold. It was a stubborn cold. It wasn't quite going away. Certainly not as fast as I would have thought. And the fatigue that we were feeling was really, annoying and inconvenient, to our plans, at least, of trying to be productive and do things.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that became really clear, although it was stubborn and we were surprised as to the fact that we were actually catching something, is that as I was doing inquiries with my body, with Brian's body, it was something that was going to serve a really great purpose. And we see this as a theme, really. If you look deeply at your life, the things that seem to be going wrong or the things that are coming across as like, why is this happening to me, are really happening for a good reason. And it turned out to be exactly that case. There was so much learning and lessons that happened as a result, but there was also stuff happening at the body level. So I'll just inject this here because it's kind of an interesting point, is that my body actually, when I inquired about what it was that my body was starting to deal with, it came back saying it wasn't exactly the flu, but it was actually an energetic aspect of the flu, of this particular virus, which was interesting to note. And I'm just sharing this here because there are many different, how would you say it? There's many different ways we can be expressing something in the body. And this comes up a lot with our clients too. Like, oh, is it a reaction to mold? Is it this virus or this thing that's happening in the body? And quite often the body will actually come back and say, well, it is presenting like that, but it's not actually the physical representation of it. You are developing symptoms, you're expressing symptoms, but it's actually contracted through the energetics. So just an interesting side note, and it came up again when I asked about myself. So Brian had it physically contracted, and there was actually an energetic component to you as well because of someone you had engaged with previously. And then my body came through and said, no, this is an energetic aspect of that virus, and that it wanted to have this experience because the higher self and the body do work in conjunction to give us orchestrations and experiences. So my body was looking for specific codes that were present in the virus that you were carrying, and so took this as the opportunity to get it for itself. And then there was going to be a whole bunch of different lessons and really cool blessings that came from it. But that was the first bits of wisdom that my body and higher self were wanting to share about this, which was really interesting right from the get-go. Mm-hmm.
And even as to see that sort of energetic residue and code, upgrade, you might call it, and how even on a physical level, right? That's what our body does with viruses. And, Dr. Zach Bush describes it as if they are our software update, right, to our hardware. And have been for as long as we've been, existing in this form on this planet. So certainly nothing to fear here, right? But it's all conspiring in a way to our growth and development, whether energetically or physically. Mm-hmm. And usually it's going to come out as a mixture of both.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit of both, and some personal growth in there in the mix.
Mm-hmm. So as we're making our way through this process, I start to feel better as you start to feel worse. Mm-hmm. And so I think, okay, I can, go out and get some fresh produce, some fresh supplies, bring back the goods to...
Including some homeopathics.
Yep, you were indicated for homeopathics, which are one of your main go-tos.
Yeah, they are, because it's all energetic. So I've been a fan of homeopathics, since I was in my early 20s, I guess, when I first learned about homeopathics, because it's really, there's nothing there in the homeopathic, right? It's just an energetic signature of something that will bring the body back into balance. So my beloved sister-in-law, my brother's wife, is a brilliant homeopath, and she was kind enough to be on Messenger with me at the very beginning stage, especially when it started to get really uncomfortable, and she was able to recommend a remedy a couple of remedies actually along the way. And so you went out and grabbed those.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also important to describe your symptoms a little bit, because they were much more intense than mine were.
And they were very different. Like yours were presenting much more like a typical flu or cold. And mine, I just started to feel a little bit tired the first day. The second day I was a little bit more sluggish. But then by the third day, what I experienced was body aches, which was really weird. And it felt like the fascia in my body, like looking at and visualizing the way the patterns of the fascia run through the body, those fascia lines, that's exactly what was aching. And so every direction, my body was just sore. And then there was a mild headache that was building and building as time was going on. So there were very different symptoms, which made sense because my body was sort of hand-picking certain things that it wanted to experience.
Mm-hmm. And so all throughout this, we're having, our vitamin C, our vitamin D, like I said earlier, our elderberry syrup, oregano oil, all these different things. But when I went up to get the homeopathic, I thought, okay, let me stock up on a couple other things that will be supportive. And these days, everyone's talking about things like zinc and quercetin and these different substances, natural substances that can support the immune system. So I grab a quercetin complex and bring that home, along with the homeopathic and a couple other things. And, start from that point on, which is probably day 3 or 4 of you being sick. From that day on, those are part of your protocol, right? Part of your nutritional stack, as it were.
Yeah. But on the first day, the first time you tried to give it to me, it was the day, I suppose it was in the evening after I had taken the first dose of the homeopathic remedy. And what often happens with homeopathics, not often, but sometimes, is almost like an accentuation or an exaggeration of the symptoms that you're feeling, which is kind of known as a healing response of sorts. And so that started to happen with me. So my body aches increased, got really uncomfortable. It kind of started out as like really just feeling fidgety. Like every moment I sat still, there was discomfort. So you kept moving. And then the headaches started to increase. So at this point I had nothing, no real additional supplementation, just the regular vitamin C and D and a few other things, but very little. And didn't feel called to take anymore. That was the thing. This is where the journey of falling off from listening to the body, which is something that I do professionally and should be doing personally, started to fall off. So I was not taking anything, didn't really feel called to it. And then the pain or discomfort really started to intensify. So now this headache that was mild, as the body aches got really bad, I guess it was around 10 o'clock at night, we were starting to wind down, wanting to go to bed. And then I start noticing I'm actually developing what feels like the early stages of a migraine. And so you guys have probably had the experience of feeling pain or discomfort, and it's exhausting. And so this had been going on for a few hours. And I started, and it was also late. And so I was starting to feel really tired. And
you also threw up.
Well, that was just it. So you had given me, this was the first time, just maybe around an hour before the whole nausea, vomiting started, you had given me some supplements. You said, you know what, let's give you something. I just brought some stuff home. It'll help support your immune system. And I didn't feel called to take supplements all up till that time, but going on your recommendation, because you're so good at what you do and I trust you and I love you. And so I'm like, okay, sure. I just opened my hand, you popped a bunch of pills in, and I threw them down the hatch. And I had been drinking lightly. I hadn't been eating for about 3 days. Like my appetite was just in the toilet. And, well, not literally. That sounds like vomiting. Okay, so my appetite was very low. And so I take the supplements, and then within minutes, I started to feel nausea. And that's one thing I hadn't been feeling. So I started feeling nauseous. And then it started building. And I tried to drink a little bit more water. Ironically, I think there was one of them was sort of stuck in my throat a bit, which just complicated it and made me try and drink more water. And then within about 20 minutes, I'm like, babe, pass me a bucket. And I had to throw up. And then what I threw up was the pills. I threw up the supplements right away. And then I'm starting to question whether I did or not. But I was throwing up mostly liquid.
I didn't see anything when I dumped the bucket, just to be explicit. There was no chunks of any sort. No pills I could recognize. So I think they had already dissolved.
That actually makes more sense too because of what happened in the morning. So I started throwing up and then trying to clear my mouth and clear my throat. I drank more water, and it's just the more I tried to put in even just little sips of water, I was just throwing it up and throwing it up. So in effect, what we didn't really, in the moment, didn't really notice is that I was essentially dehydrating myself because I hadn't prepared my body to go through what I started going through, which was the nausea and then expelling so much liquid. And so I got myself into a state where by the time we went to bed, I was dehydrated. But before we went to bed, I couldn't keep the supplements. I couldn't keep anything in my stomach, but the pain then started to increase because of, the pressure that comes with expelling as you throw up and vomit. So I said, babe, what am I going to take? And as I was asking the question, I had asked my body, I did tune in that moment and asked my body what it wanted. And it was like, I was like, do you want anything? Because up till that point, I had not been taking anything for the discomfort in the body, the aches, and I hadn't taken anything for the headache. And a big reason of that is because I had just started taking a homeopathic supplement. And when I start taking one of those, you kind of want to give the remedy a chance to do its thing before you start introducing other things that are going to mute symptoms. And so by that point, it was intense enough that I said, and I asked my sister-in-law, I said, do you think it's okay if I take something? My body was asking for aspirin. It said, sure, take aspirin. And it's something that, as you were explaining before, is a little bit more, it's a simpler formulation. It's not like taking something like Advil or Tylenol.
Yeah, it's just acetylsalicylic acid, which is very related to what's in willow bark and not much else. They're pressed tablets.
Yeah, easy for it to dissolve in the body.
Very easy and very safe, right? Even at higher doses, aspirin is something that is quite safe and quite effective. But I had a memory. So here I am anchoring into the past and drawing that forward. I had a memory that the last time you had a migraine, we got these Advil liquid gels and that it seemingly worked, right? So I thought, are you sure you want the aspirin or do you want something stronger? Something that's going to really work on this pain. Well, it's something that's
made for it, right? You had reminded me that it's actually made for the migraine pain.
Mind you, they have, blue coloring in these things and like propylene glycol, which is like antifreeze and all kind of junk, right?
I didn't know that. Thanks, babe. Jeez. Now you tell me.
You bought them.
It comes out in a public show.
See, she didn't read the labels all the time.
I didn't read the labels. No, I was like, is anything there say relief from migraine? Sign me up.
Yeah.
And this is what we do, right? When we're in desperate moments, when we're feeling so... It's the desperation and it's the mind. And this is what happened to me. In that moment, my mind went to, I don't think I can go through the whole night like this because it had been going on for hours by this point.
And nights. You already had like 2 nights of bad sleep.
That's right. For probably sort of unrelated, but perfectly timed situation, I was not sleeping the 2 nights prior. So I was up so much. There was a lot energetically that was happening at the time.
Yeah.
And so that was creating a lot of dreams. Both of us were having a lot of dreams, but I was just waking up in the middle of the night and being wide awake. So I wasn't actually getting sleep. And so here I was now on day 3 or day 4, where no sleep is one thing, but the moment you introduced pain and migraine symptoms and nausea and all of that in the mix, is like I don't think I'm going to do well if I don't sleep tonight. And the pain was the key. So Brian had suggested, "Are you sure you don't want to take the Advil liquid gel? Because that's why you got it." And I honestly, in that moment, I questioned. I didn't really have the same memory that you did, that it worked that well, but I remember taking it. And so in that fog and delirium of like headache, if you know what it's like to have a really intense headache, and just being in so much discomfort and so tired because it was now way past our bedtime. And from the physical stuff, I was like, okay, just give it to me. It was like, whatever, just give it to me. So what was I doing? I was disregarding exactly what my body asked for. We'll never know now. It could have been that if I had taken the aspirin, I might have gotten the relief I was looking for, right? This is the thing. The body knows exactly what it needs in the moment. And if we are able, or if we choose to find out what it really wants in any given moment, we'll get the best results. And I didn't do it in that moment. And it was a fear. And this is great because your mind was bringing up something I'd used before, right? Questioning what my own intuition was suggesting. Well, not intuition, but my body's wisdom was suggesting. And then my mind, in those moments, right, when we're weak, when we're fatigued, or we're in pain, that's when the mind can really have a run of the situation. And my ego kicked in and brought up projections into the future, like, oh my God, what if you don't sleep? And trying to stir up fear in me that I might not sleep and I could go through this feeling of discomfort all night. And was even showing me images of you sleeping soundly next to me like an angel. And I was like, no, I want to sleep too. And so I said, fine. And I didn't take the aspirin, and I took the more...
Advil.
Yeah,
And
the gross stuff, the 2. And I didn't just take 1. I decided, give me 2. So I took 2 of these extra strength things, went to bed. I couldn't keep much down.
Yeah, so you're still dehydrated.
Still dehydrated. Didn't even notice it, like in the throes of everything, because everything happened really quick. It was over a span of about 30 minutes at the end of it. And so go to bed, and intentionally trying not to drink much before I went to bed because I didn't want to throw up the liquid gels. Like, talk about a recipe for disaster.
So the next morning... You did sleep.
I did sleep. I slept like a rock.
Yeah, you did sleep, which was good. But you woke up and...
felt like I had glue in my head. So I woke up realizing I'd slept through the night, and then I knew why, because as I got vertical, it felt like someone had poured glue into my head, into my brain, and it was the most really interesting feeling because I could feel the intensity of a pain point behind what felt like a blanket of goo, which was just like numbing things out. And I've never felt that before. And in that moment, I was like, uh-oh, that wasn't probably my best choice. Mm-hmm. And then as I stood up, I became present to my kidney. So my right kidney was aching.
Mm-hmm. And you had an operation on that kidney when you were very young.
I was 1.5, and so the top third was removed.
So that's like your canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
If you're stressed out, it's like that's the part that'll act up.
Well, not stressed out particularly, but if I've taken, because the only time it's ever bothered me in my entire life has been if I've consumed something that my body would really, really not like, that felt like it was toxifying it. So the only time in the past that I've ever had that happen was when I was like a teenager and, experimenting with alcohol, and if I drank hard liquor.
Another dehydrating substance.
Yeah, Southern Comfort.
Yeah. So that's the recipe that we had going on that it puts you into that state, and I continue feeling better and better over the next few days.
Yeah.
Living on soup, making lots of soup and rice, and taking my supplements very dutifully, and offering yours, once or twice a day.
Yeah, so that was it. So you continued to give me supplements every day because what was happening with me was I was developing a fever every day. And so, which okay, made sense. We thought, okay, maybe this is just part of the cold, the flu symptoms, because sometimes it comes with fever. But what was weird is that it would come and go. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't like a steady thing. And it wasn't, and so also to add to this, because my symptoms changed, the body aches went away. What felt like a migraine headache was no longer present. But what I was left with was this lingering fever. And so I went back to my sister-in-law and was explaining. I was keeping her up to date, and she was doing really such a beautiful job of like walking me through what remedies to switch to. So she switched me to another remedy to deal with the fever. That was the main thing, I think. Fever and the nausea, because those were the two things that were persisting.
Mm-hmm. And the kidney aching.
And the kidney aching, exactly. And so I was concerned about the kidney, but assumed that the fever at that point in the early stages of it was just a result of the flu. Mm-hmm. So I continued taking this new homeopathic remedy, and it would bring me relief, amazingly enough, because at the end of the story, that's not what was the issue. And I continued to take the supplements, and I continued to get fevers, And I've continued to have the pain in my kidney, which historically, if I've ever consumed, like I was joking about the Southern Comfort thing, that was like one night Halloween. I think I was 19 years old and I was just in love with this drink. It was like candy. And then the next morning I felt terrible, but I noticed my kidney aching. And so normally what happens is within a day or so, my kidney goes back to feeling normal. It's just like that it was stressed from that event, but this wasn't letting up. So the kidney pain was continuing. It wasn't really getting worse. Well, actually, I think it might have been getting a bit worse. But the point was, it wasn't shifting like I was used to because my body's really resilient in that way. And so we get on day 3, I think, of the fever continuing off and on. I got bored. I was so tired of laying on the couch and doing nothing and not having any mental energy to put towards work or even read or even watch things. And so you were going out again to get another remedy. We're going to try something else and pick up some things from the grocery store. And I said, okay, I'm going to come with you. And I just wanted to change scenery. And then I called one of the telehealth lines. And so I spoke to the doctor there and was kind of trying to describe my symptoms because by this point, I had suspected that I may have a kidney infection.
Yeah, because one of the things that you didn't mention is you had held your pee.
Oh, yeah.
Because you didn't want to sleep, get up from bed.
That's right. Right? And that was on the first day.
So that holding the pee combined with the kidney damage from the painkiller combined with the dehydration, all those things together could theoretically spark a kidney infection.
That's right. That was the conclusion I came to anyways. And so that was what I was going with. So I went into that conversation with the doctor saying, I think this is what has happened, and described the symptoms. He says, I can't prescribe you anything. I said, okay, fine. He goes, you'd have to go in and see someone. I said, but does it make sense what I've described, like being dehydrated, taking the painkillers, that and then holding my pee that night because I so desperately just wanted to sleep and I was exhausted, that it could cause the kidney pain? He goes, yeah. He goes, absolutely. You could totally have damaged your kidney doing that. So then that freaked me out. I was like, uh-oh. So I didn't come home with any kind of, I was actually looking to get potentially antibiotics and have them on hand in case I couldn't get things to start to turn into a better direction. But so the pain continued. And so after the conversation with the doctor, that's where I was going with this, is we get home and I finally decided to sit down and do an inquiry with my body as to what was going on. And this is something that if something comes up with me or something comes up with Brian physically, I'll take the time and we sit down and I will do an inquiry, which is literally going into a really deep discussion with the physical body, with the energy body as well. And the higher self usually gets involved. And it's all about trying to find out what exactly is going on right now. What's happening? What are the symptoms? What is at the root of this? What is causing this? And the reason I hadn't done that previously is because, as you all who are listening are probably familiar with, when you've got a fever, you can't do anything. Like, it just really knocks you out.
Yeah.
Energetically, like, you feel so drained. And when I'm going to do a discovery and start asking the body questions, it takes energy and it takes time. Like, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, depending on where the conversation goes. And so I kept looking at that as a chore. And I was like, okay, really, my mind was going, okay, this person knows what remedy to give me. I'm just going to see what they have to say, trust them, and go with their recommendation. And then Brian, my beloved, he knows what supplements to give me. I'm just going to trust him, let him make the decision, and go with it. So I was bypassing the one being that really needed to be consulted, which was my body. And so this was where the lesson came in, and this is where it also was coming in as like, what a beautiful gift and powerful gift this was for me personally. So I finally sat down and said, babe, I need your help. And it wasn't as much that I needed help with the inquiry as I was so tired. I was like, can you please type, and we'll together, I'll ask the questions, but I'm going to need you to type out all the answers, because when it comes through, there's just a lot of information and I don't retain it all. So we sat there on the couch together. And I started asking questions, and what came forward was a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, so at the root of what was going on, and also to throw into the mix here, part of why the kidney and the nausea, right? Which I guess we'll get into, but essentially dehydrations and a lack of electrolytes.
That was the first thing that came forward.
Because you had been restricting sugars and simple sugars in your diet because of the potential kidney infection.
Yeah.
Right? So avoiding the coconut waters and the things that we usually always have that are super hydrating that would have been very supportive to help that recovery process take place.
Yeah.
But before we jump there.
Yeah, before we jump there. So in this discovery process, well, you kind of already mentioned it, but what happened was...
That was one piece.
Yeah. So in one of my last conversations, as soon as I got the idea in my head that, you know what, I think I may have actually induced a kidney infection, I consulted with someone else and said, does this make sense to you? Because it makes sense to me. And again, what does making sense mean at the root? It means we're using the mind to try and put pieces together and solve the problem, which is not the direction I would ever normally go. And yet, like first, I always like to go there eventually, but not first, especially with this. And I did it again. So one after the other, consulting the mind and not consulting my body. Excuse me. So I asked, and it made sense to the other person too. Like, oh yeah, and it made sense to the doctor. And we talked about it. I looked it up online. You know, do all the things that you do, right? When you're not feeling well and you think you're on the thread of the truth. And so it made sense. And so what you do in that situation is, like you said, you start to avoid the simple sugars, avoid things that typically we would consume. Because if I knew I was dehydrated, which I had suspected, and we realized that the next day when I'd woken up, then I would be drinking coconut water. I would be having some fruit. And my body was actually asking for that. I could feel the pull towards it. But I was pushing those instincts and that guidance away because I was replacing it with what my mind had decided was the best plan of action, which was to avoid those things, no sugars in the body. And so what was kind of funny. The advice then is to take things that are much more acidic because you want to acidify the body and the fluids so that there isn't any infection that is continuing to develop in the kidney area, which wasn't even a thing. I found out. So what was I drinking? I was drinking
green tea and this UTI cranberry
juice.
It's a cocktail with like burdock and like echinacea and a marshmallow root and juniper extract, but very acidic.
Yeah. And I went to that. That was the first thing that I thought to go to because historically, as a kid, if there's ever anything going on in my body in that area, I have a few drinks of that for a day, maybe a day and a half, and all symptoms gone. So that's the first thing. My memory goes back there, and yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. So started taking the teas, and I was drinking so much acidic stuff that my throat started to get raw from the acidity. And again, what a sign, like, hello. Tune into your body. So during the discovery, that's one of the things that came up. The first thing that came up was, it's not a kidney infection. I'm like, oh, okay, great. That's good to know. I don't need to probably continue to drink all of this stuff that is now like stripping my throat. The second thing that came up was the reason for the nausea and this constant feeling of like I'm going to be sick in my belly and why I couldn't eat much is because of the dehydration, but more so it was a deficiency in electrolytes. And that's when I really hit my head. I went, oh my God, how ridiculous. We'd basically been going completely counter to what the body was really needing because of a really interesting and sensical story, right? Which how many people go through this on a regular basis? You think, because we don't know unless we're able to ask or we are getting input about what the body's specifically asking for, we're going to do the best we can. And how do we do that? We consult other professionals, and we try to put the pieces together in our own mind.
Yeah, you try and find something outside of us or historically that matches our experience, and we can say, oh, that must be that. They're a match. And then let me do what they did or do what's, the best thing to do.
So not to beat that up, because that's the best thing to do in the moment if you don't have any other recourse. But it was a really interesting inquiry. So that was the first part that was so interesting. So right off the bat, it was like, okay, wow, I'm severely deficient right now in electrolytes. What do you want to have? And so my body gave me a beautiful list of things that then you went out to get more of. So it was fresh strawberries, which fortunately the garden in the kitchen, I had a few strawberries growing there. And so those were the first things I ate were those strawberries. But then you went out to get more strawberries. It wanted cucumber. It wanted coconut water. And potatoes, potatoes, which seemed so funny. But yeah, and instantly, like I started consuming those things, started drinking the coconut water, and within that day, the nausea went away. The other thing that we discovered was in asking the body about
The kidney.
Yeah, about the kidney.
Right, it wasn't an infection, it was nutritional toxicity.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah. So nutritional
toxicity.
So basically, I was being poisoned, and this was hilarious as it started to come through, was like, yeah, because it came through as a toxin, as a poison. And I'm like, what? And then I started thinking about, what have I been taking? And then I was asked about the supplements. So interestingly enough, although I hadn't been called to take supplements through most of this experience, when you did give me supplements, there were 2 supplements that I felt a natural resistance to and ignored. And it was quercetin and it was the zinc formula. And I ignored it, really just too exhausted and wanting to just let others make the decision. I should have just tuned in, but I didn't. And so what ended up coming through was, okay, ask about those supplements. And so I said, babe, can you look up that quercetin? What does it say on the label about contraindications or times to avoid it? And what did you find?
Yeah, essentially, if you have a pre-existing kidney condition or kidney disease, then quercetin can be toxic in large doses.
And can damage the kidney.
Yeah, so that was a big oh, shoot.
Shit!
Because I don't think of you as having a kidney condition, right?
No.
It's not like you're walking around with a dialysis, machine or something like that. So in my head, you're healthy, right?
But after that night, I technically had a kidney condition.
Yeah, an acute kidney condition.
Yeah, it had been beat up and it was suffering already.
And I had just never heard of quercetin in that way, right? People use it all the time. People use it for immune support, for energy support, for allergies, all kinds of things. But there does seem to be, it's one of those things that can definitely be overdone and definitely does not need to be taken regularly, right? So if your body does tolerate it, it's like, okay, take it for a small amount of time. Take it with your vitamin C, whatever. You get the synergy there. You get the effects you're after, and then stop, right? But so you've been taking it for days. And having that kidney condition. And so it's like, okay, so this is when the medicine becomes the poison.
And it was the same story with the zinc formula.
Yeah, so the zinc formula, that was actually a prostate formula that I picked up because it had zinc, a little bit of zinc, a little bit of tomato extract, a little bit of pumpkin seed oil, and some saw palmetto. All good things, and all things that you had even taken saw palmetto before previously for a hormone rebalancing that worked really well.
Yep.
But in this form, at this time, your body was not having it, right? So those 2 things were really the, how do you say?
They were the culprits.
They were the culprits.
Well, we were the culprits.
They were the tool. They were the tool that came forward to be, singled out as an example as to why you don't do this approach or why you need to slow down.
And it was so instrumental. They were so important, and it just flowed so perfectly. And the other thing too is about dosing, right? We have to ask about dosing because you were giving me a higher dose because you were trying to support my body as much as possible. Meanwhile, higher dose of something that's toxic and poisonous in that situation, just compounding it, making it worse. So after that discovery, I was just, I laughed. I'm going through, I'm like, I can't believe this. I'm like, babe, you've been trying to kill me. You've been trying to kill me. Of course, kidding, right? But it was really quite funny, like the irony of the situation. And had I been in a right mind, really, which was all about more about right energy because I'm just too tired.
Well, that's just it, right? And you said at the beginning, you do this professionally and you should do this for yourself. And just to be clear with that with everyone, you do this for yourself
I do.
99% of the time.
I do.
Right? You're always tuning in, always
Yep.
asking, how much of this do I want this? How many of these? And just having that back and forth.
Yeah.
But like you said, when you're sick, you can't be your own doctor.
Yeah.
And you can't think straight.
Yeah, that was the words that came through over is like, you can't be the doctor and the patient at the same time, but you can tune in. And so we made a deal after. I'm like, okay, babe, next time, anytime I'm too tired to sit down and actually have a discussion with my body, I need you to say, have you asked your body? Because I really do. I ask my body about everything. Mm-hmm. My body is like the doctor now for, my thyroid medication, right? Taking the desiccated. And it working with my body in that way each day, it's been able to wean me down, and my body is feeling more and more balanced as a result. So that's just one thing, but I ask it about everything. But what came through this, and we were talking about upgrades earlier, mm-hmm. is that out of this experience, so basically you go to the store, you get all the things that the body asks for.
Yeah, the cucumbers and a
lot of potatoes.
Strawberries and lots of potatoes.
And all of a sudden, within a day, I start feeling better. And I start eating a lot of potatoes and butter and salt. And I'm just starting to feel like slowly starting to come back to life. So I was like, oh my God, body, I can't believe. I can't believe. It was really ironic because it just had to be set up. The situation had to be set up in just a way for me to detach from that connection and detach from the source that I go to all the time to get feedback. But what came of it in terms of the upgrade is that my body, after this experience, started communicating in such a more, what's a good word for it? It was like really
precise, immediate.
It was just like more loud. It was speaking more fully. I was feeling the communication more. It was almost like abrupt. I don't know how to describe it really. But what came of it was that there was just more of a connection.
Teacher. It's like a stern teacher cracking the whip, or like a sensei, the Japanese martial arts sensei who says, do this now. No questions, smack you with the stick.
That's right. And it was like that, particularly coming out of the experience of having the fevers and being dehydrated and all this stuff. When it wanted something, it was really adamant. So I would say, for example, I'd say, babe, I think I need potatoes. And at this point, I was still weak enough that you were preparing some things, most things really, for both of us. And so I was like, yeah, I think I need potatoes. And I said it in that way because I hadn't been eating a lot of potatoes, right? My mind would have told me, oh, that's a starch. Oh, you don't need that. And my body, though, knew better. It knew the goodness in potatoes. So if it asked for something, it wasn't just saying, yeah, I'd like to have some at some point today. It was like, no, I want it now. And so it would feel like it was yelling. And so I would have to convey the message. I'm like, babe, no, like I need it now. And so it became kind of a fun game where if the body asked for something, my body asked for something, I want to say the body. When my body asked for something, I had to listen and respond right away. And if I did, the feeling of relief, the feeling of nourishment, the feeling of being supported was so strong and so obvious. But if I didn't listen and I waited, it really felt so much the opposite. It was a feeling of almost like desperation. Like, I have to get this in, because my body was making me feel uncomfortable emotionally, physically, and even mentally. Mm-hmm. As if I wasn't listening. And like you said, that stern teacher. So it was really funny what the next week looked like. It became actually a week and a half. It became whatever the body wants, whatever my body wants in that moment, it's going to get. And so it was completely catering to the body. But what came as a result of that was the most beautiful recovery and so much of a deeper relationship between my own body, not just a client's body, but my own body, and tuning in even more frequently. So it was like walking through every moment, asking my own body and also my higher self at times too, what do you need right now? What do you want right now? What are you trying to accomplish? And it was such a gift.
Yeah, and so now we find ourselves early December. Mostly on the other side, little bits of fatigue, but even that's fading in the last few days. We slept a lot, right? We slept a lot during the process, which is always essential for recovery. But we've got our natural immune boost for the rest of the winter and really the rest of our lives. And like you said, are more attuned to our individual needs, right? And not trying to fit into the box that we think is best or that we in the past has been best, but really going with the flow in that sense and trusting that there is a rhythm to it, that there's things, it's been very cold and snowy, especially the last little while. So that's a different stimulus, right? It's a different environment we find ourselves in. Dry air, my goodness, we had the driest air. We kept waking up feeling so dry and mouth dry and everything dry, nose dry. So we got the humidifiers going, so the air is getting humidified. So it really expedited all these things. Like, okay, food, check. Air, moistened. Hydration, check. Electrolytes, good. Small amounts of physical activity, not so much where we put ourselves back into nap territory.
Yeah, really gentle.
But small amounts, okay, good. So it's really been, like you said, this great remembering and learning process to get even more, committed to trusting that wisdom.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things that was a real wake-up call for me, and I think for both of us, is like we both have a background, different, varied, but backgrounds in nutrition. And when we learn things, they stay in our mind as kind of rules to follow. But especially now, at this time, where our bodies are evolved to the point where they are, and they are evolving, and the consciousness of the body is becoming more and more vocal, we need to be willing to let go all of those rules, all the things that we've learned, because no matter what source that's coming from, it is never going to be as intelligent as what is going to come forth directly from our own physical beings. These vessels are more than just vessels. They are entities and beings that they know what they need. They know what works in any given moment, and also that shifts moment to moment. So much like the last couple of years has been about us as human beings letting go of the routine, the lives that we have led that are very regimented and following a course of action without fail, we've been forced into situations where we've been, needing to learn to flow with things and just go with what presents. Now the next phase is doing that with the physical body. So being willing to let go of what we think we know, what we think is best, like the whole idea of potatoes and butter, right? That brings up all kinds of ideas in the mind of like, well, it's an animal product. I don't want to have that. But my body didn't want coconut oil, didn't want olive oil, for example. So being willing to let go of all the rules, including it was asking for fish, which again, I had not been eating any animal products really for a while. And so my mind, if I let my mind get involved, it would say, well, you don't want animal products because I know all the reasons why not to have them. But my body was asking for it. So instead of letting my mind make the decision, and this goes for all of us, letting our minds be the ones that drive the bus. We need to now start being open to the idea of letting the body drive the bus and the higher self wisdom that comes through to drive the bus. So it was a beautiful lesson for both of us.
Yeah, and luckily no seeming long-term damage was done. I'm sure the kidney's going to recover and probably already is and has.
No, it feels much better.
And so hopefully you can glean some insights from our misadventures and short-term suffering and ignorance.
Yeah.
Suffering caused by ignorance and just, being confused and being stressed out and being tired and fatigued.
Well, and let's also thank our own divine aspects for orchestrating such perfect situations where we felt like going the mind route was the way to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this never would have happened. And I want to just say thank you. I feel like I'm accepting an award. I want to say thank you to my own physicality for being willing to step into this place of excruciating pain, of disrupting and kind of, mildly probably injuring, part of itself, all for the greater good, because what we got to go through as an experience together, as individuals, as a couple, and as practitioners who get to work together too, we learned and grew so much through this experience. And had it not been for our bodies and our minds and higher selves that orchestrated all this fun, not only would we not get the benefit, but we really, this has become such a, it's reinforced the focus and importance of this, that now it's not something we gently share about the importance of needing to listen and get that inner wisdom from the body. Now it's more like, yeah, this just has to happen. This is the only way it can go. So we've been, what's a good way to say it? We've been re-inspired.
Initiated.
Yeah, totally.
It was definitely an initiation of sorts.
Yeah. And it's important this time, like right now where we are in our own, in like human evolution, because this point in time is a turning point where the body is going to be taking a front seat, where the body is going through so many changes that we need to start to listen and be willing to flow with those changes.
And we're going to see those changes reflect out into our world, right? With changes on system levels and institutional levels, and beliefs, mass beliefs, and things that people have held on to and taken to be true, and being initiated into a place where we see a deeper truth, we see a deeper reality, and can align with that as we move forward, which is really the goal, right? With all of this, it's how do we keep ourselves healthy and vital and clear, right? So that we can continue to adapt and align and create in new ways and in ways that are called for.
And can better hear through being more clear and strong. We can more hear the guidance that is always available, that is trying to come through.
Totally. So if you made it here, we want to thank you for coming on this little excursion. Hopefully it's been useful. If you had insights, questions, comments, anything at all, feel free to be in touch with us. We are quite easily accessible through both Facebook, Instagram. Those are probably the easiest places. And wherever you're listening to this, there will more than likely be some links down below for staying attuned and following along with this journey. Because certainly, if you are in a place where you know it's time to commit to your own body, to essentially step up and step in, and I'm speaking to the brothers here primarily, because this is the work that we do with men, is through the revitalized man, is to step up and step into a place where you are putting your own energy, your own vitality, your own self-care at a higher priority, right? And learning those things and embodying those practices and those tools to understand how to feed yourself, how to nourish yourself, what your body's calling for, and how to give it that so that you can show up and serve in the way that you are here to serve, be that as a husband, a father, a son, a brother, a business person, whatever, an artist, a creator, doesn't matter, right? We do health not for its own sake, but so it can enable us to be ourselves in our fullest. So if that is of interest to you, if you are in a season or approaching a season where you know that's being called for, then specifically reach out to me. Right? And on Instagram at Brian Hardy 7, or on Facebook, Brian Hardy, or revitalizedman.life. And all those places will connect you back to myself.
Beautiful. And if you are a sister, then if you have questions, if you're a sister and you are curious about some of the stuff that we've talked about, feel free to reach out to me as well. I do work with women in a couple different areas, but we have the Awakening Eden Mentorship Program and the Eden Codes, which is something that we are all really excited about. The women who are going through this program now, we've had some amazing, amazing experiences and transformation. And really, it's about revealing that part of us that is always in communication and stepping more into that in our fullness and being able to let go of so much of the mind and the things that are distracting us from being able to be fully present and fully expressed, and now with the physical body also be fully expressed and strong and vital and resilient in the physical body in ways that we never thought were possible. So that's more the work I do with the women on that side. So feel free to reach out to me via Instagram or through Facebook or anything else that you may find in the link below.
Yeah, and you're at Katya, Katya Marie Williams on Instagram, and also on Facebook the same.
That's right. Yeah.
That is it, y'all. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for hearing our adventures.
Yes, many more to come, and hopefully onward and upward.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes. No hope. It is a knowing. It is a knowing. That's the direction we're going in. Whether we kick and scream and drag ourselves through the bloody mess on the way there, or we allow ourselves to be lifted by a little bit more divine grace.
Yeah, it just depends how much fun we want to have in the mud.
Indeed.
All right. Bye for now, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Love you, baby.